Been out here all night? How'd you get out of your cage? We're rolling? Oh. Do I look okay? Welcome to From the Mind of Christine McConnell. It's the house tour episode. Okay, today I'm doing a house tour. I bought a house in the mountains about 5 years ago, and I thought it'd be kind of fun to sort of show you all the things that I've done to it since then. So come with me. Did I catch him? Oh, good. Get the handcuffs. I purchased this 1930s forest cottage in 2014 and have spent the last 5 years improving it in various ways. I fully scraped, primed, and painted the exterior of the house as well as the decks and stairs. I felt like the house needed a touch more character, so I built these planter boxes from scratch. Painted and sewed some exterior cushions. As well as making over the landscaping. One of the most lovely things about living here has been experiencing all of the seasons. Come on in. So this is the top of the house. We're going to start from the top, work our way down. This is the master bedroom. It's the only room on this floor. And because it is at the top, all the walls are slanted in. This is Werewolf. I adopted her just a couple months ago, and she's gone into her teen years, and she's crazy. I'll let her down. Anyhow, so with this room, when I first moved in, I could not afford wallpaper. So I kind of had this idea to go and buy a bunch of different colors of paint and paint my own wallpaper by hand. So that is what I did. This is the first room that I did it in. So it's not totally perfect, but I ended up loving it so much that I did it throughout the entire house. I'll definitely be doing an episode in the future where I cover this technique and all of the cool things you can do with it. I also built this entire little shelf system. I make a lot of my own dresses, so I need to keep a pretty big inventory of fabric. I never keep it organized. I think I organized it one time, and that's kind of as good as I can do. So fabric over here, more fabric over here, and tons of like sewing equipment and all of those things. I think I have probably like 4 different sewing machines just because I break them a lot. I'm a little rough on them. Come on over here, I'll show you what else I've done. So this is the bed where I sleep and the newest little member of my family. I have been like rescuing cats my whole life and finding them in dumpsters without eyeballs, and that's a true story. And I've always wanted like a fancy cat. So this was a big splurge for myself, and he is the first and possibly the last fancy cat I'll ever have. Just because I like rescuing animals. But I don't know. I lost my little best friend just a few months ago, and this was like a treat to myself. Anyhow, his name is Vincent Price, or it was. And then he's so poofy, so I started calling him Professor Poof. So his legal name is Vincent Price, but his stage name is Professor Poof. And he's just like this hairy pile of squish that you can kind of do anything with. And he purrs and he snorts and eats and sleeps all the time. So he's just kind of like the best thing ever. So let me show you where I get made up in my vanity area. This is my vanity. This is where I get made up every day. I mentioned when I bought the house, I had spent all my money on the down payment. I didn't have a ton for furniture and extra stuff. So a friend donated me this old lace she was getting rid of. I found an old board and built this vanity. The mirror came from a thrift store. That mirror came from eBay. The chair I'm sitting in came from the side of the road. And it's really creaky, but it's lasted 5 years. So if it isn't broke, don't. Actually, I think it's broke, so whatever, it still works. Anyhow, so this is mostly a house tour, but also I figured I'd answer a few questions that I've just seen frequently, and one of them has to do with makeup. I am kind of a mixed bag with makeup. Half the time I buy it from the drugstore, and then half the time I get like something fancy. So if I'm really gonna splurge, I really like Christian Dior's lipstick in Hypnotic Matte. This is the color that I wear for special occasions. And then for everyday stuff, I'm actually friends with the girls at Melt, and they sent me this lipstick and I just ended up using it all the time. Old Rose is the color that I wear pretty much every day, everywhere I go, anytime I'm on camera. And then if I'm feeling kind of like a little bit gothic, Catsuit is really, really good. And the last one is Lisa Eldridge. She's my favorite YouTuber. I watch all of her videos. She just started coming out with lipsticks, and she has yet to come out with like a dead old lady color, which is my favorite shade. But until then, I will support her, and it's really pretty packaging. Anyhow, I think I'm ready to take you on the rest of the tour. I'm gonna change really quick, and I can't wait to show you all that I have done downstairs. This is one of my favorite things I've ever been given. When I did the gingerbread project for the Winchester Mystery House, they actually gifted me with a few pieces of the Lincrusta from the original house. So it's like having a piece of the Winchester here in my home. So I have a few very, very favorite things, and this is right near the top of the list. Come on down. This is my very small dining room. I found the table and chairs on Craigslist for, I think, about $80. Hand painted all of the walls and did my own stencil. I've made all the draperies in the house, so I hand painted a little bit of a pattern on these ones. And I even built these nice little corner. They're for storage, but they're like, it's 50-50, half decorative, half storage. I have a lot of extra dishes and baking supplies and things, and that's kind of where I stow that stuff away. I make all my own floral displays just from stuff at Hobby Lobby, and I find antique vases to work with. This is my very, very favorite set of china. I collect china. And this one I found at a thrift store for an insane steal. And I brought it home and I was so excited about it. And then I realized, because I wanted to get a few extra pieces, I tried finding a few extra on eBay, and I found out it's Lenox and it's super pricey. So I haven't been able to like buy the complete set, but I take very good care of what I have here. And let me show you what I've done right over here. So one of the bigger construction-y projects I had to do with this house was the kitchen was only equipped for a small, tiny oven. And I had found this beautiful old antique oven at an estate sale, and I needed to make room for it. But there was like this built out thing that was caused, like the heating ducting was going through it. So I had to tear out the wall there and sort of redirect from under the house the heating up through this room. And so I built this little cupboard to sort of camouflage that. So there's a heating duct in the back, and then obviously just storage in the front. And it's worked out super, super well. This house has a lot of my firsts in it. So I think this was the first cabinet sort of thing that I ever built. And it's held up really well. So I'm so pleased with it. And then I've got all this fun little decorative stuff next to it. So this is the kitchen. I think it's one of the most important rooms in a house, and especially for me, just because obviously one of my big things is that I bake a lot. It's very small, but gets the job done. Looking for a vintage looking kitchen from the beginning in California was really, really tricky because most of the houses are new, and those that are old, most of them have been modernized by quite a bit. And that had happened here. There was like slate tile on the ground, the grout was black, and the cabinetry didn't really sort of have the feel that I wanted. So I stripped out the grout and re-grouted it, hand painted the floors, and I took the cabinetry that existed and I cut grooves into it and did a bunch of woodworking, like this sort of gingerbread sort of pattern, and painted it obviously, just to kind of give it like that old-fashioned grandma's house feel, which is kind of my bread and butter. And all the colors, these really, really pretty like butter yellows and almost like a grayish blue sort of color, I matched from this vintage refrigerator. I found this at an estate sale for only $100. It's been running since the 50s, and I actually got it at the same estate sale where I found this oven, but this had been sort of stowed away in the garage as sort of like a beer refrigerator. But it was so beautiful and I could see the potential in it, and so it had to be sanded down and repainted. But it came out so pretty, and it's got these beautiful sort of lazy Susan shelves, which I just think are so amazing. And modern refrigerators just don't really have cool little features like that. So I have done so much in this room. It's very small. I think the whole room is probably maybe 10 by 10, if that, maybe only 8 by 8. But all of my baking projects that I've done for my book and for so many other things have just been done in this little thing, and everything has been baked out of this really pretty vintage stove. So this oven has just served me incredibly well. Pretty much every cake and cookie you've seen me make in the last 5 years has been made in it. That's how reliable it is. A couple more sort of estate sale finds that I have that I absolutely love is this French fry press. I found it in some old guy's garage at an estate sale. You put a potato in there, then you pull that down, and I like it because it kind of reminds me of Frankenstein a little bit. And then the next one is, I'm such a huge Golden Girls fan. I watch that show like almost every night. And so when I found this very interesting shaped lobster mold at an estate sale, I nabbed it up in 2 seconds because there was always one really prominently featured on that show. I think that's enough for this kitchen. Let's head into the living room. So you may have seen this room before. I have featured it heavily in previous like videos and pictures, but it's the living room, and I figured I'd take a second to sort of show you what it looked like when I first bought the house. It was white walls. The door had been painted black, as well as the brick on the fireplace, so I had to use paint stripper to get that all off. I hand painted the pattern onto the walls, painted all the trim and ceilings, and had to totally rip out carpet, tear out sort of tattered old linoleum, which I love linoleum. If it had been salvageable, I would have kept it, but it was not. And so it all had to be removed. There was tons of paint droplets everywhere that had to be sanded off and sort of just totally refinished from scratch. Now, this is pretty much one of the absolute favorite things that I have in my house. I'm just not a fan of how modern TVs look. And so I wanted to build a cupboard that could sort of conceal it and look really pretty and cool. So I built this entire thing totally from scratch with no pattern. It's such a complicated process. I'm probably going to have to make an episode of the show that sort of delves into it, but I can give you like a sense of how it operates. So when I started collecting antiques, I quickly found out that you may not be able to afford all of the fanciest things that you want, and I definitely fell into that category. So I really wanted an old gramophone. I started looking for them, and they can be insanely expensive. So I ended up finding one in France that was damaged and actually needed to be sort of stripped and restored. And so that's what I did with this one. And now it works perfectly. And I have found with most antiques, like pretty much anything is fixable. So if I find an antique with a big crack in it or like some sort of big scratch or something, a lot of it is mendable. And then you can have things that maybe look very expensive, but are kind of more affordable. So the last thing I'll talk about in this room is a comment I see a lot of people asking what I'm listening to on headphones while I'm working on various projects. And it's kind of a combination of two things. My mom turned me on to like Audible, like listening to books, and it's kind of like the best thing when you're in the middle of all that stuff. So I do that a ton. True crime books, Helter Skelter is my #1 favorite book. I've been listening to it. I've listened to it probably like 7 or 8 times. And it's just fascinating. You hear the whole story from the prosecutor's point of view. His name is Vincent Bugliosi. And it's one of my favorites. It's so fascinating. And then if I'm listening to music, I love Gunship. They are my very, very favorite band. And they have been for probably like 2 years. So, and they're kind of, I know it doesn't really maybe go with this because it's like 80s new wave sort of music, but it's amazing and it just makes me feel great while I'm working. So those are the answers to those questions, and I think we're ready to move on to the guest room. This is the second room in the house. It's sort of the guest room. It's right off of the living room. It is so cute and cozy in here that wherever I end up moving, I think I'm going to replicate what this room looks like just because I enjoy it so much and I actually spend quite a bit of time in here. I'm not a huge fan of having framed pictures of myself in the house, but I do love this one in particular just because I recreated some photos of my ancestors, and this was a photo of my great, great, great grandmother. And my mom has the original picture of that relative. And so I had this printed and just put in here just because I just think it's spooky looking and it's not necessarily a glamour shot. So anyhow, I hand painted the walls. I did the curtains myself. One of my absolute favorite Craigslist finds of all time is this 1949 Packard Bell television. It was down in San Diego, so I had to go on a little bit of a trek for it. But I've got it hooked up to an Apple TV in the back. And so for copyright reasons, I won't have anything on the screen right now. But one of my very favorite things to do is to sit in this bed with a bowl of popcorn and watch old Twilight Zone episodes. And I'm trying to think, Dark Shadows is another one I love watching on this. It's just kind of this really fun, immersive way to make it feel like you're back in time. And it's something I always do on like a dark and stormy night. So this is Gertie. She is my 5-year-old Wheaten Terrier, and she's the first dog I've ever had as like an adult. And she's just so cute and happy, and she likes cats. So she brings a lot of joy to my life. So one of the things I did before shooting this episode was I put a little thing out on Patreon asking for people to give Q&A questions, and I figured now would be kind of a good time to cover some of those. One of the top questions was, what is your very favorite sort of antique that you have in your house? And it is this. I found this on eBay, and every time I've had like a windfall from like maybe like the book coming out or the Netflix show, I've always kind of like splurged on something, and this was what I splurged on after the Netflix show came out. I think it was $400. I got it on eBay, and it is a picnic basket from, I think, the 1920s, but it also has a gramophone built into it. I think this was custom made for a couple in London in the 20s. And so I got it. It's in beautiful condition. It works perfectly. And then I'm trying to think, I did add some bows and made my own custom napkins, and even found a few extra green pieces to try to match with the original It looks like, what do you call that? It's not jadeite. I think it's actually bakelite, that has this really green, pretty swirl to it. Okay, so let's play a record. Let's see if this works. I think it should. There we go.
If you go down in the woods today, you're sure of a big surprise. If you go down in the woods today, you better go in disguise. For every bear that ever there was, we gather there for such because today's the day that teddy bears have their picnic.
That's Teddy Bear's Picnic by Henry Hall. So anyway, I know this may not excite too many people, but for me, it is my absolute most favorite thing that I own. So that's the answer to that question. So now the second favorite thing, and this is going to seem even more ridiculous. I've been looking at pictures of vintage kitchens for years, and there was this one faucet I found, and I started hunting on the internet for it, couldn't find it anywhere. And I've never seen one for sale ever. And so what I do on eBay, if I really, really want one specific thing, is I put in like a search, and then it notifies me by email if something comes up. So this is a Magic Queen faucet, and it's from the 50s. And I got a notice one morning. My little phone beeped and it said, "You have a message from eBay saying this item is up for sale." And I was like waking up when I saw it, and I just couldn't even believe it was real. And again, this is really silly for most people, but I love it. Anyhow, that is it. It's crazy heavy. It's so beautiful that I am saving it for my dream home. So whatever house I get next is where it is going to go in. But until then, it will rest peacefully in its original box. So I needed to get my computer so I could make sure I answered these correctly. I think I've got it narrowed down to just about 8 questions. Bridget asked, did you have any professional help, interior designers, when you did your home? And the answer is no. My mom actually had an interior design company, like sort of like something she was doing herself when I was a kid. And I learned a ton from that. And I'm kind of terribly cheap, and I just want to do things on my own, and that's sort of where that stems from. So pretty much everything in the house I sort of did myself. And then it looks like Chambray asked, did you have any grand vision in mind as far as the design and decorating? No, I kind of like, I like having each room be its own sort of atmosphere, as far as like, I like kitchens that are light and colorful, as well as living rooms that are really dark and sort of eerie. So I've kind of like playfully put everything together in a way that just feels fun for me. And Michael asked, how do you organize all of your stuff for your various skills and interests? And the answer is, I don't. I'm trying to think. I've got stuff stuffed under beds, packed into closets. I mean, to do all of the different things that I do, you need a lot of like odds and ends, and there's not really like a perfect way to organize all of those. So I'm kind of winging it a little bit, and I think most of my drawers are sort of spring loaded. If you pull something out, it's like, who knows what's going to come out at you. Let's see. Brandon asked, what were your biggest challenges you faced while making the house over into the home you have now? I would actually say budget was probably, I've kind of gone through like a whole weird experience from buying this house. I grew up kind of, my parents struggled a lot. I bought most of my like back to school clothes from a thrift store. And then when I kind of went out on my own, it was just, I've been struggling sort of financially like my whole life. And so when I got into this house, I had to buy a house that was as inexpensive as possible. And then just every little bit of money I got, I kind of would go to estate sales and find fun little weird things. So like I said, it took about 5 years to sort of get everything in. And really only until Patreon came about um, did things really kind of just become super possible for me. That was kind of the everything. It kept feeling like things were happening, and like this was going to be the thing that like made life easier and made life less stressful. Um, and nothing ever like panned out to be that until Patreon. So budget was the biggest thing, and then I kind of went off on a tangent. Let's see. Nouveau asked, how do you hide, design, or incorporate ugly new stuff that's necessary, like appliances and electronics? This is kind of a big one for me. Like I mentioned over here, I've got an Apple TV hidden away. I like camouflaging televisions. I don't even own a microwave just because they're so bulky and difficult to camouflage that I've just like, I don't really need it that much. So it's tricky. I just hide as much as I can and stick old flowers in front of things that I don't want to see. Allie asked, what has been your favorite project you've done so far? What was the hardest one you've done? My very favorite was actually that owl TV cupboard, just because it's something I did that I get to keep forever, and I love it so much. I'm so proud of it. Sometimes you do things and you're not super proud of them afterwards, especially after like somebody's gotten them or they're out and you can't adjust them anymore. But that is one of the first things I've done that I'm like super proud of. And then hardest projects I've ever done was decorating my parents' house for Halloween last year. That was definitely one where I bit off more than I could chew. And we're almost done. Nicholas asks, where do you find interesting pieces? Mostly estate sales. I think I follow someone named Kim's Estate Sales, and if you go on my Instagram, you can find her. But she has amazing stuff. She always finds like these cool time capsule houses, and time capsule estate sales tend to be the ones where I do the best at. Let's see. Lauren asked, will you recreate what you have in your current home when you move to a new house? So I've talked about this on Patreon. It has been my dream to find a big old creepy house back east somewhere. And I've just now, this is really like a feasible thing for me to do. So in spring, I'm going to be selling this house and looking for like something bigger and older and creepier. And so will I be recreating? No, I think I'm going to kind of start over. I think I've documented so much of this, like so many times, that I'm kind of ready to leave most of it and just sort of start fresh and create some sort of like really new, creepy new place with all of these skills that I've kind of honed. All right. And Michael asks, this is the last question. Michael asks, do your kitties or pets ever ruin things in your home? The answer to that is very funny because my two little kitties that I lost just like over the span of like the last 2 years managed to, when I moved into this house, I totally furnished the living room, and over a period of 6 months, they actually managed to destroy all of it. So pets are incredibly destructive, and so I've kind of just learned to be really diligent about trimming their claws, because the claws are sort of the thing that is the worst. And then obviously cats sometimes have bad behavior, and so you have to really, really stay on top of it. But to answer your question, yes, cats ruin everything, but they make the world better. So that's kind of, I'm cool with that. All right, so I think that's enough Q&A. I think we should go downstairs and I should show you the last room of the house. So now we are down in the last room of the house. This is the third bedroom of the house. I don't think it was initially intended for that. I actually don't know what this was. It was definitely the biggest challenge I found while sort of renovating this place. And it is also the most recent one that I tackled, just because it was so confusing. Is it a bedroom? Is it a basement? I didn't really know. But I was able to convert it into a bedroom. I hand painted all of the walls, did the ceiling, added some additional woodwork to sort of make it seem a little more cabiny. Redid the floors, and then I found this beautiful old bed. This is another one of those Craigslist finds. I take a lot of chances on Craigslist for some reason, but that's how that worked out. And then I just made all of the drapes and found a bunch of little special antiques to throw in here. this vanity. I have always wanted one, never could afford one. And then Colleen Smith, who is Rose on the Netflix show, called me one day and she's like, hey, I've got this thing. Do you want it? And I was like, she sent me a picture and I immediately drove over to her house to get it. So, and I think we turned that into a sleepover. So that was a fun memory. Here is the couch that I featured in the first episode of From the Mind of Christine McConnell. I never sit in it. It's just too pretty. I don't know, but it's definitely one of the things that I love so much and kind of pulled the room together, I feel. And now that I've covered all of this, I feel like, you know, I'm pulling the wool over your eyes a touch as far as I made the house look perfect to be filmed, and everybody's got like a room in their house where they just sort of stuff all the things that they don't know what to do with. And I am no exception to that. So as sort of a parting gift to you, I will show you a little bit of the disaster that is usually my house. On the off chance any of you are concerned about me giving out too much personal information in this episode, I don't think you need to be worried. Thank you for watching and have a happy Halloween.